The fact that they're saying there's no chance of them using a nuclear weapon actually scares me more on like a spiritual level than them saying we could use it, we could use it. So the first thing I want to say is that Russia's ambassador to the United Kingdom came out and said that Russia is not going to use nukes. He said it is out of the question. Out of the question. And then when asking, is it off the table? He said, yes, I am saying it is off the table. This is a very clear statement from the Russian ambassador to the British Isles. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Battlefield is now stabilized, in your words, and not moving, but the Russians also face a lot of pushback, and the West says the Russian military operation is not going as well. Is Russia trying to escalate this war?
First of all, in his conversation, the Minister of Defense Shoigu, he assured every minister once again that we are not going to use nuclear weapon. And there was no single statement, neither by the president or responsible guys. I do not take journalists, of course, and all these talks on the television. So Russia is not going to use nukes. So it is out of the question. Second is that for about a month and a half already, Ukraine offensive has stopped. Nothing is happening.
Okay, you said that. I don't want to have you repeat yourself, but this is really important what you've just told me, that Russia will not use nuclear weapons. Absolutely. Now, tomorrow, in a month, in a year, no matter what happens.
I cannot say about next generation.
In a conventional scenario, yeah. Are you saying that your country has pledged, your defense minister, not to use nuclear weapons?
Yes. Yes, this is what I'm saying, and this is what has been said by defense minister, by our president, and all of that. So,
and your president has said that too?
He never mentioned a possibility of using
it. No, but he has. You know,
there are speculations.
He's raised veiled threats, and it's worried everybody.
No, there are speculations and allegations and issues that are trying to be, which he has never pronounced, in fact.
As you know, President Putin has made veiled threats. Now, the West has seen no movement in Russia's nuclear posture. But again, you're saying it is off the table.
Yes, I am saying that.
Okay.
Okay, is it okay?
Oh, yeah, it's okay. I mean, I just want to be really clear about this, because it is the most important thing that we need to know at this moment. As you know, many world leaders have called it absolutely irresponsible for Russia even to have ever mentioned it. So it's really, really important to hear what you're saying.
Okay, can I be honest? This is gonna be weird for me to say. Let me zoom in for a second. This is gonna be weird for me to say maybe, but the fact that they're saying there's no chance of them using a nuclear weapon actually scares me more on like a spiritual level than them saying we could use it, we could use it. Like if North Korea, like if Kim Jong-un came out tomorrow and he was like, what nukes? I don't know what you're talking about, buddy. We would never. Like like on a spiritual level, that scares me more. That scares me more on a spiritual level. Because I feel something's up. I feel like there's some games at play. You know? There's some tomfoolery going on. That's my original like spiritual kind of reaction. Now, I will say, and I've said this before, that in the lead up to the use of a nuclear weapon, because a lot of people are hardcore doomering, a lot of people are using kind of like fearmonger tactics to make you guys think nuclear Armageddon is near, nuclear Armageddon is near, we're all gonna die, we either give Russia everything they ever wanted, or we all die in nuclear hellfire, let them build an empire, or we all die. I mean, not like we can look at many other times when nations had this predicament, whether it was the Soviet Union invading Afghanistan and they failed, millions died and they had to pull out, and that partially led to the collapse of the Soviet Union, whether it was our invasion of Vietnam, which we eventually pulled out of, whether it was the closest example you could even think to post World War II was probably Korea, and that was a stalemate with the North Korea, and even then a nuclear weapon was not used in that instance. So there's been so many instances where nuclear weapons have not been used, which have even been, I would say, higher stakes than this one. And when Russia and the Soviet Union was particularly in a stronger position of power. And so I don't think somebody can just simply say, oh, they invade, invasion goes wrong, and then they just make terroristic nuclear threats. Now we all need to take it at face value that they're gonna do it if they fail. Definitely when there's many, many more repercussions for using a nuclear weapon than there are benefits. You would have, through the use of a nuclear weapon, a small benefit, possibly strategically. You would have to use a lot of small nuclear weapons, and I say small because there's like different types. There's like strategic and there's tactical nuclear weapons, and I know like small is like underselling it, so I'll just use the word tactical nuclear weapons. They would have to use a lot. They would have to use a lot of tactical nuclear weapons to really have a significant impact on the battlefield. They couldn't just use 1 or 2. They would have to use like 50. You have to use like 50 to 100, and something on that scale would be that would be almost unbelievable. And the main effect, really, of the use of one of these nuclear weapons would probably be killing civilians and damaging the local environment. Probably wouldn't have a massive, immediate strategic effect. Or maybe like I think tactical effect, maybe, but not really long. I don't think it's gonna like change the balance of power. It would largely, and I'm not saying anything that's controversial right now. Thank you, by the way, Buckeye, for the tier 1 sub, the 18 months. Wasting my money for 18 months. Hey, isn't it a blessed thing? Thank you, and thank you, Crying Raidwald, as well. Haven't talked to you in a while, Buckeye. I appreciate all the money. But the main effect of these nuclear weapons would be for terror purposes. It'd basically be a terror weapon, which is horrific, but it doesn't change the balance of power. Russia, of course, has shown itself to be willing to use these types of tactics, especially with Iranian drones and targeting local Ukrainians. But it's not going to change the balance of power significantly. Then there's all the repercussions that come with it. The first immediate repercussion is there's a chance Putin could give the order and it could just be disobeyed. And one of the most basic rules of leadership is you do not give an order that is likely to be disobeyed. You don't do it. That's a terrible idea. It whittles down your power. And this order would have to go through a general, like a commander, then the soldiers, then we have to deliver it. There's so many different levels it has to go through. So many different levels it has to go through before it's actually delivered on the battlefield. And if just one of those people said no, then it doesn't get launched. And then what? Then is that a crisis of power in Putin's administration? Do they just like forget the order was ever given? Does Putin try again? But if he tries again and they show that they could say no once, they might say no again, and then you might worsen a crisis of power. So there's a million issues when it comes to actually like hitting the button and seeing it launched. Jesus Christ. Sodanaki, thank you so much for the 300 bits, for all the war coverage and being based. Thank you. And Tsunamaste, thank you so much for the 5 gifted tier 1 subs. I appreciate that. Throwing that all around to Shirley, Dev, Devils, Zibichu, and 2 others. I really appreciate that. I'm on a roll right now, so I don't want to stop too much, but I appreciate all the money that everybody's gifting in chat right now. I really miss it. I mean, I really appreciate it. So that's the first issue with launching a nuclear weapon, is what about this crisis of command that could occur? And then there's another problem with launching a nuclear weapon that, well, it could end up actually hurting Russia. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster was picked up not because the Russians admitted it to the world or the Soviets admitted it to the world. It was picked up because the Swedes picked it up. If we have some Swedes in chat, you should know from your own history that Chernobyl was exposed to the world in the disaster of Soviet mismanagement at Chernobyl due to the fact that the Chernobyl radiation went all the way over in clouds to Sweden. It also affected Germany and Russia and Belarus and all these other places with skyrocketing cancer rates. Children were told to stay inside in East Germany because of the radiation. And that's after a slow Soviet response, of course. So if the weather goes a certain way or the winds change, radiation could quite literally just be carried over to Moscow if it goes wrong, or carried over to other states. And then that diplomatically involves all these other states much more deeply. You think Poland is going to play nice if they find out that a nuclear weapon used in Ukraine is giving their people cancer? Those people who are just chomping at the bit to try to just hit Article 5, you think they're going to play nice? You think they're going to play cutesy? I don't think they're going to play cutesy at all. Tsunamaste, thank you so much for another 5 gifted tier 1 subs. Jesus, you're just letting it rain over there. And we're just kind of talking about some of the more immediate effects. We're not talking about the long-term effects right here. Let's talk about the long-term economic effects. This is like the one scenario where you can actually get China and India to agree to a price cap on Russian oil, or possibly an embargo. Higher amounts of sanctions. This will rack the Russian economy. In fact, you should see almost an immediate, you're going to see an immediate Russian stock market response to this, because there's no way this is going to be good for the Russian economy. And the reason why I'm generally confident that we're going to see a wider economic response isn't only because the West is going to intensify their sanctions, and anyone within the NATO sphere is basically almost at gunpoint going to be forced to sanction Russia harder. Okay, it's going to be hard for Hungary to wiggle out of that one. Is China and India are going to have an incentive to get involved in repercussions for Russia, because both of them understand that if Russia goes crazy with the use of nuclear weapons and breaks what has been a nuclear taboo set in place since 1945 in the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, if that nuclear taboo is broken, what does that say for their regional power struggles? What does that say for their diplomacy? You think India is going to be very confident with a nuclear-armed Pakistan on its border and a territorial dispute in Kashmir? Pakistan will probably feel the same way about India. What about China and I'm going to use the word lapdog, but I will say it's mad dog Kim in North Korea, who has been doing constant nuclear threats. Somebody who still ideologically does want to take back South Korea. What type of message does that send to the Kim regime if the message is sent that Russia can use a nuclear weapon and get basically no repercussions, and still the international community will allow him to win the war and get benefits from using these weapons? That's going to encourage people like Kim. And I know some people are like, well, why would China care if Kim Jong-un's encouraged? China does not want a war on the Korean Peninsula. It would be a massive refugee crisis sending back over the Chinese border. That's something the Chinese don't want. They also do not want North Korea to get smashed by the United States and South Korea, which if North Korea gets in a war with South Korea and the United States and they initiate it, the odds of China participating in that war do go down. And if they lose, then that means American military bases most likely on the border with China. And that's something China doesn't want. Not to mention, they foresee more, let's say, international incidents with the United States in the future over Taiwan, and they don't want it to be normalized that tactical nuclear weapons could be used on the battlefield. They don't want that to be normalized at the moment. Definitely now. We have no indication at the moment that they want that. So it's going to encourage more international sanctions. And that's not even talking about the increase in aid Ukraine's going to get in response to this. Oh my God. Oh my God. We're going to see weapons sent into Ukraine for testing that we've never seen before. We're going to see a massive increase in military aid, humanitarian aid, and all different types of aid, economic aid as well. This would be the perfect justification for all of Western Europe and the United States to redouble aid efforts. So honestly, it could lead to Russia being in a worse long-term strategic position in the war in Ukraine due to that massive increase in aid. We see long-range missiles. Oh my God, that's not even a question anymore. That's being sent. We're going to see possibly German tank. There's so many items that can get checked off the list at that point. There's so much to this that would be a negative for Russia, which is why I think the nuclear weapon and the nuclear threat for Russia is most useful. Like all weapons, this has been wrote about by like game theorists for a while. Most weapons will never be fired. Most weapons will never be used, especially weapons as destructive as radioactive nuclear weapons. The most use these weapons usually get, outside of the 2 times they've been used historically in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, is as a negotiating tool to balance power internationally and to dissuade invasions, and used as a tool of deterrence. Israel knows this. The United States knows this. Russia knows this. India knows this. Pakistan knows this. China knows this. North Korea knows it. And Ukraine has learned the lesson very brutally after the Budapest Memorandum. And so, honestly, if I'm being for real, the odds of them using it when it's much more useful as a tool to scare people like they're doing now, and as a negotiating tool, I think are again low. To be quite frank, nuclear weapons are much more useful in diplomacy unused than used, because you can use them as leverage. That's also true a lot of times for weapons, where you use your giant arsenal of weapons and a strong military to negotiate concessions that would be, how you can say, untidy or unuseful to fight for. This is just, I mean, I feel kind of stupid because I'm like explaining like basics of diplomacy, but like, yeah, that also applies to a weapon like this. Definitely, since this weapon is going to have a lot more repercussions than the use of a Moab in Afghanistan or the hypersonic missiles that Russia have used in Ukraine. Anyway, let's talk about all the repercussions. Now, when it comes to this, as I've said before, in the scenario where Russia does use a nuclear weapon, they're not going to be like, oh, are we going to use a nuclear weapon? Are we not going to use a nuclear weapon? And then they use a nuclear weapon. It's going to be, we are going to use a nuclear weapon. Give us these things or we will do it. And then they do it. That would be the idea. That would be the most, that would make the most sense for them using a nuclear weapon. The reason why is, again, it's more useful as a negotiating tool. And they really will, at every possible opportunity, try to get what they can get without using it. Because once they use it, they're going to have such repercussions, they're going to come with it, that they're basically just throwing the last Hail Mary pass. And they want to do everything they can before they feel like they have to do that last Hail Mary pass, which can massively backfire. Massively backfire. And so if they were to use it, I think we would see a large escalation in rhetoric and a move in nuclear posture, which we haven't seen. U.S. security analysts haven't seen it. Nobody else has seen it. And so we see rhetoric like this from an ambassador. I don't know if this, like, this message really indicates that they're heading barreling towards the use of nuclear weapons. If the messaging they're giving is, we're not going to use it. Now, I need to give two addendums to this. Two separate addendums to this. The first addendum is, when decisions are made in Moscow, they're not always made with everybody knowing exactly what's going on. When the decision was made to invade Ukraine, most people had no idea what was going on. Ambassadors had no clue from what we know at the moment, and a lot of people in the foreign ministry had no idea what was going on. In fact, I think most of the foreign ministry didn't know what was going on. And then the invasion just happened. Hell, it seems that a lot of soldiers that were invading the fucking country didn't know what was going on. So if everybody in Russian society didn't really know, except for apparently the United States government knew more than Russian government officials knew that the invasion was happening, which is wild. There is a chance that something like this type of decision could be made. Somebody like this guy isn't told that they're escalating towards the use of a nuclear weapon, and so he says something like this. I would say that I don't think that'd be smart diplomacy, since again, it's much more useful as a negotiating tool, but that could be one explainer as to why he was saying this that could be outside of the framework I've built. There's also the other idea that, you know, and this is a fact that you always need to know, the Russian government are liars. They lie constantly. They lied about invading Crimea and annexing it. They lied about it being a democratic referendum. They lied about the little green men. They lied about supplying rebels in the Donbass. They lied about the training operations in the border. They lied about the false flag attacks and the plans of Ukraine to invade Russia. And they lied all of the entirety of this war. They lied about their execution of prisoners of war. They have lied constantly over and over again. They lied about the biochemical weapons used to target Russian DNA. And now they're lying about another thing, the dirty bomb. They're making up this rumor, this idea that we do need to talk about, that a dirty bomb is going to be used in Ukraine by the Ukrainians to frame Russia. I'm sorry, but you can't make nuclear threats for 9 months and then say the Ukrainians are going to nuke themselves if there's an explosion. Don't worry about it. It's like if I for 8 months am like, I'm going to stab you, I'm going to stab you, I'm going to stab you. And then I'm like, you know, tomorrow he's going to stab himself. Like we all see what's going on there. Nobody's stupid. You can see it. You can see what's going on. Let's listen to this news report on it, and then I'll talk about it a little bit more. And we'll look at the evidence that Russia is providing for this dirty bomb claim that Ukraine is going to. This is the city that's brought up the most. I went to the city, beautiful city, by the way, Mykolaiv. I was shelled there, sadly. The claim is Mykolaiv usually brought up the most, that a dirty bomb is going to be placed under a major population center, set off for some reason to frame Russia so Ukraine gets more support. Let's listen to the claim.
Right, there was more threatening talk today from Vladimir Putin. The Russian president said the risk of world conflict is high as he oversaw the start of nuclear military exercises. He also repeated the unfounded claim that Ukraine may be planning a dirty bomb attack. CBS's Holly Williams is following developments from Kyiv.
These Russian nuclear drills are an annual event. But this year they come during a vicious war with Ukraine and anxiety that Moscow could use a nuclear bomb in anger. Vladimir Putin watched the exercises by video link. He's openly threatened to use nuclear weapons. And today he repeated Russia's accusation that Ukraine could be planning to detonate a radioactive device, a so-called dirty bomb. The US calls the allegation transparently false. A dirty bomb is less harmful than a nuclear bomb, but uses conventional explosives to spread radioactive material, causing contamination. There are fears that Russia could be laying the groundwork for a so-called false flag operation, staging an incident and then blaming Ukraine, perhaps as a pretext to use a nuclear weapon. President Biden warned Russia against it.
I'm not guaranteeing you that it's a false flag operation yet. Don't know. But it would be a serious, serious mistake.
Russia's military appears to be struggling in Ukraine, recently losing swaths of territory. Today, Ukraine's defense minister told us Russia's exhausted and trying to force Ukraine and the West to negotiate.
What you're describing is sort of nuclear or radioactive blackmail.
Yes, this is a blackmail.
The US says Russia's rhetoric...
Okay, you get the idea. So, dude, the Russian government doesn't care that much about having like a consistent narrative, right? Russian propaganda really melts your mind. We've watched enough on it on this channel to show you how ridiculous it is. Whether they're threatening to drown Ukrainian children, real quote, that was said on Russian state TV, by the way, or saying that everybody who identifies as Ukrainian should be shot. Like, it's just ridiculous calls to genocide every other hour. So you don't expect Russian propaganda exactly like hold a consistent narrative. It constantly contradicts itself and pushes false narratives all the time. But they can't expect the rest of the world to see something that, like, let's say this actually played out like it was a false flag attack. Would anybody in the world who has paid any attention to this conflict, even a momentary glance, actually believe that narrative? Any international government, it's going to be Belarus, Syria, Bashar al-Assad, Syria, Kim Jong-un, North Korea, and what is known as the North Korea of Africa, Eritrea. That's going to be who support it. That's who's going to be like, yeah, we agree with you. That's probably what happened. That's going to be it. Those are the exact countries. Mark my words. If this goes down, those are going to be the exact countries that don't vote to condemn Russia. Everybody else is going to either vote to condemn or abstain. Maybe Honduras. Maybe a Honduras.